way, Noah Gragson, reinstated, obviously suspended a while back. He's been off the radar, exact opposite of what Kyle Larson did. Kyle was out there, man, winning races and racing everything he could get in. What do you think's next for Noah?
I think he's going to end back up in NASCAR, right? I think he's going to spend the rest of the year running the late model. He's going to run a Pinty's car.
I was going to say, I saw him testing a Pinty's car.
Before he went down to Toledo. I think this is going to be the beginning of his kind of barnstorming tour where he's going to run everything and just remind everyone that he's a racer and he just wants to be in a car. And I think he's going to have some options. He's a guy that, has proven he can win at, the Truck Series level, the Xfinity Series level. I think most important for him is he needs something that's kind of a cultural fit. I'm not saying something that will tolerate or allow what happened to him, but he is a very quirky personality type, and I think that the moment that Jimmy bought in there and kind of changed the culture a little bit, that was never going to work out for Noah. And so I think that whatever Noah does next, it's got to be a team that kind of embraces kind of his various personality nuances, for lack of a better term.
What team do you
So him and Chris Rice are going to get along real well.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, too. I think that they complement each other very well. They're guys who like to have fun. They can have fun. But I also think that Chris is professional enough that he can draw a very clear line and you can have a good time, but we're going to get to work on Saturdays and Sundays.
Well, on the same topic of driver team changes, what do you think about the news this week, especially around Trackhouse with SVG siding with Trackhouse and then Zane Smith as well?
Yeah, so SVG is, that was inevitable, right? Like he was always going to end up there. I can't wait to see what the schedule looks like. I know that Justin says that he's waiting to see what the national touring schedule looks like. I kind of floated out on Twitter. I said, man, I'd love to see SVG run at least one full season in something and make it Cars Tour.
I saw you said that, yeah. I thought it was also a good idea.
Yeah, and he said, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be cool for him to have one anchor series in addition to, a dozen Cup, a dozen Xfinity, a dozen trucks. And so I'm super excited for him and what that's going to look like. As for Zane, listen, I've covered Zane since he was 12 years old. And he has won in literally everything he's ever driven. And, Keselowski said it on Monday, this guy's going to be a champion, and we would have wanted him too. And I think that's accurate. Zane's going to be a superstar for a long time, and it's just a matter of getting him comfortable and up to speed.
Yeah, and I think what's kind of funky about this whole Zane Smith thing is it's like the world came 360. I mean, when Marks went and bought Ganassi, Ganassi had Zane under contract. So it's kind of cool for Zane that he probably hit a panic button going, oh, no, what for me now? Like, what's going to happen to me? And then you fast forward, here he is. How much pressure, though, Freddie, does this put on Daniel Suarez?
A lot. A lot, because not only do you have Zane Smith sitting there under contract, you've got SVG, who is coming. It's just a matter of how quickly he can adapt to ovals and how quickly, the idea is to get him to a Cup as soon as they can, because he is a guy that's he could be a perennial playoff guy because he can go out and win road course races. And we have, 4 or 5 of them on the schedule. But, yeah, you're sitting there now and, obviously pretty sure, I don't even know if it's been announced, it may have been, Zane's going to run at Spire, more than likely. They bought that BJ McLeod charter for $40 million. So he's going to run there for a year or two, who knows. But there's a guy in-house under contract sitting there waiting to take your seat. So and listen, Daniel, the performance hasn't been there of late. They've been struggling pretty bad the last month or so, I feel like.
Ross hasn't been as fast as he obviously ended the second half of last year either. But I think, Matt, that the Wicks turned up on Suarez.
Oh, I agree. Listen, so Ross is still, in the championship mix. He made the playoffs. Daniel didn't. The ceiling it's always been high for Daniel, so it's not a matter of can he be that guy. I think he can. But the problem with Daniel has always been consistently putting those runs together. And I think the next-gen car has kind of exaggerated those characteristics too, because this car kind of makes you even less consistent inherently. And so when the car can already be kind of a bit of a dart and you don't know from week to week whether or not you can contend for wins, listen, he's going to be under a lot of pressure. And I think that, one, you've got 2 people who now want your seat, and those charters are not easy to come by. And I know Justin wants another one, but at $40 million, God, the supply and demand is pretty scarce.
Well, on that note, for those who may not be as close to the industry, what is driving up the cost of those charters, since its inception?
Right now it's the pending TV contract. Teams anticipating getting a bigger chunk of the pie, and it's basically like stock market. It's speculation. You talk about guys who are buying charters for what, like $12-13 million a couple years ago.
No, they were 5 or 6.
Yeah, I mean,
it wasn't that long ago that Furniture Row sold theirs to Spire for $6 million.
Yeah, and now you look at it, here it is. That's 5 years later, and
I mean, Dale Jr. was sitting here going, "I'm not paying $10 million." Well, I bet he wishes he would, because that ain't a bad return, right?
Yeah.
I'm all for it, and I'm all for it because, and I don't want this to sound condescending to BJ McLeod, but we took away a car that gets lapped first almost every race, and we're seeing a team buy it in Spire Motorsports that historically, prior to this year, had for the most part run in the back with at least one of their cars. So what you're seeing happen is a big investment from Spire into expanding. And you're seeing a big investment in Spire of getting rid of drivers who historically haven't won and bringing in guys that obviously haven't won in the Cup Series yet, but they're going to be winners. When you look at your driver lineup, and it's Corey LaJoie, Carson Hocevar, and Zane Smith, that's a pretty dang powerful, opportunistic lineup. So I think it says, and based on what they're doing from a manufacturing perspective, it sounds like they're really lining up to have some technical alliances. Guess what that cost? A bunch of money, millions of dollars. Guess what else they've done? I asked these guys on here about a couple weeks ago, hey, what's going on with the spotter stand? Any big shakeups? And Freddie and TJ kind of looked at me like, no, not really. Well, I knew some were coming. And so I made a couple comments about spotters are getting paid. Well, guess what? Spire's at the top of the market. If they're paying drivers and they're paying spotters and they're paying crew chiefs, they're going to have people. They're going to have talent. If they're paying Hendrick Motorsports, make that up, an alliance fee, they're going to have faster cars. If they're paying for the best motors, Freddie, we knew for a fact last year the 7 got a good motor and the 77 was on a different plan. That's not their plan anymore. So we get to see a big investment by a back runner, Spire Motorsports. I think it elevates their game. Based on the things they're doing, I would anticipate that after a quarter way through the season next year, Matt, they're consistently running top 20 with those 3 cars.
I agree. So listen, I've always been very bullish and optimistic on the charter system going back to 2016 because as a stick and ball fan, I see the model. I see the pros of that. Having spent a year and a half in the Race Team Alliance and better understanding their market, their platform, this is a big win for the entire industry. And I know fans have kind of nostalgia glasses on. We used to go to Daytona and we had 60 cars for 43 spots. We don't live in that world. If you were to get rid of the charter system tomorrow, you're still going to have 40, 41 cars.
Yep.
We're not going to live in that era. I think what the system does is it encourages a 36-car field that everyone is trying to compete. Now, we're not going to have the ultimate parity that NASCAR intends to have, but I think with all due respect to Joe Falk and Matt Tifft and BJ McLeod, we have now replaced a car that had no intent to compete with a car that wants to win races and win a championship. That's a win for everyone, fans included.
Yeah, and when you look at it, it's guys like Steve Newmark that are at Roush. It's guys like Curtis that are over at 2311. Like, Steve's an accomplished attorney, a very smart businessman. Like, they're leading the charge with NASCAR. Rob Kaufman kind of started this whole thing, to be honest with you. I was at MWR back in those days. Like, this model is making the owners have value. That only makes the teams more funded, and it only makes everybody's game get elevated. So when I saw this, I was like, hey, good for these 3 guys that own this charter. They just made bank, and good for the sport. It's good for everybody.